We've grown up in a society where discussing our own sexuality with our family, friends, and peers has been taboo and riddled with misconceptions. Many of us feel shame, guilt, and embarrassment around sexuality and intimacy. We are often unaware of how to engage with our own sexuality in a way that is safe for ourselves and for others. Comprehensive sexuality education goes beyond the mechanics of human biology. It equips us with the tools to navigate our relationships with informed consent and respect for personal boundaries, and helps us develop a better understanding of our own minds and bodies. It can radically reduce incidences of sexually transmitted infections and unintended pregnancies, address the endemic issues of gender-based violence, and enhance our self-expression and sexual well-being. Welcome to Safe Spaces, a 4-part series by the Bangalore International Centre, in which Dr. Sangeeta Saxena takes us on a deep dive into the realm of sex and sexuality. Dr. Sangeeta is a gynecologist, author, counselor, and activist. She co-founded Enfold India in 2001 to promote gender equity, sexuality, and personal safety education. In this episode, we discuss a commonly misunderstood reality: child sexual development. I am Anisha Tawag, and you're listening to Safe Spaces.
Hi, I'm Dipankar. I'm a 34-year-old queer male identifying person. I live in Bangalore. I grew up in Bangalore and I actually went to an international school growing up. And so I've had my journey, just like all queer people, about accepting my identity. I've didn't have a lot of support, didn't have a lot of representation, didn't have a lot of examples around me, specifically catering to understanding what it means to be gay or what it means to be queer when I was growing up. Just like most people in our country, very few people do. So I've definitely had my journey and I've done a lot of work post-school, getting into college, things like that. I found community, I found people, a lot of healing has happened, a lot of self-acceptance has happened. So one thinks that, you have kind of reached a stage of acceptance with yourself after all this time, and that there's not a lot more that can shake you or sort of, surprise you still about yourself. Also, you get a little bit tired after 34 years and you're kind of like, can we just stop the healing and the self-acceptance journey, which I think is actually important. It's an important step to reach, just that point of like, oh, maybe like I don't need to fix myself anymore. Now, obviously, I guess life has its own plans and it doesn't actually ever really end. And one is constantly reminded of new things about yourself and parts of you thought, you'd forgotten about. That are still maybe hurting, that are still haven't really been seen fully for whatever they were feeling. So I was reminded about a part of myself like this, connected to my, queerness and queer identity and growing up queer. So just in the last year sometime, I was having a conversation with my mom. So my memories of school are really like nobody had any clue that I was gay or queer. That was what it was in my head. And to the point where even I didn't have a clue because it wasn't even spoken about. We didn't read about it. We didn't talk about it even in like class or like through like, texts. Nobody was watching anything about it. There was nothing. There was no even mention of the words and things like that. This is how I went through school. This is how I graduated. I left. And then later I had to like find my own way. I came into my sexuality in a very private way in high school, only with myself. doing things like on the internet or like, on the down low, not telling anyone, very, very private, right up until I left school. And it's only when I graduated that it was like, okay, I can sort of come out because I actually saw other people. So it was almost like it doesn't even exist. Okay, so I have a vague memory of this. That there were these few sessions with this counselor when I was really young. And then there was also one session where my parents came in, they met this counselor. I don't know what happened in those sessions, what came out of it. I do remember it being a bit weird. Like, okay, I had to leave class and I had to go, to see this person. So it was like, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I not in class with everybody else? And I was glad that it was over. So then my mom is like starts talking about this time with the counselor. Okay. And she just kind of mentions it. And I was like, yeah, actually I have this memory of this visiting this counselor. And but I don't actually remember anything that happened and whatever. And like, do you guys know actually what happened? So she tells me basically the whole scene was I was in second or third standard. And I was like singing a lot in class. Okay. And generally just singing, and I would burst into song randomly or whatever. And for some reason, the teachers thought something is up with this kid, and he keeps disrupting class. And he's not able to focus, and he's like disrupting everybody else, and he's just sort of singing. How stupid, for you to like think that a child who is singing is like a problem, or to even like frame it as a problem in any which way. How broken is the system? How broken are you that you hear anyone, forget a child, how can you hear anyone sing? I also remember that, I mean, as time went on in school, I kind of stopped singing, you know? And so somewhere, obviously, I picked up on those cues, right? That I should stop. And it's kind of heartbreaking. And I was really like quite angry because again, one of the things is also that I think as queer people and all of us in general, but definitely anyone who's made to feel different or whatever, we tend to blame ourselves a lot. Also, there's a lot of shame, right, that comes and guilt and things like that. So we tend to blame ourselves. We think we internalize that narrative that there is something wrong with us. So we do think there is something wrong with us. A lot of us who feel different do. Not singing is my fault. Me, whatever is my fault. Like I'm the one who's broken. That's also been a process to kind of realize it's not me. I'm not the problem. I'm not necessarily looking for someone to throw all of my like anger at. And at the same time, I'm not going to take complete responsibility. I'm not going to carry the weight of that myself. There is a larger system that we're all part of. Either we're like victims of it or we become active like agents of change in it and questioning it and start sort of being awake. It is also slightly relieving because, because all this time I'm like, I don't know why, right? And you wonder why and you do blame yourself. Like, it's not just me, and it's not just random. The system is broken, and that leads to like specific things that happen that have consequences, specific consequences for people and for individuals. I had a few sessions with the counselor, obviously, to figure this out. And at some point, the counselor wanted to speak to my parents as well. So they wanted to call my parents in. Basically, one of the things that the counselor told my parents at this meeting was that she hinted that your child might be gay, might be queer, might be different to them. And like quite clearly, as in they sort of got it. Like she was basically like, I think your kid might be different. And basically, my parents just had a very typical, I guess, reaction for parents of that time. I was young. I was just maybe 7 years old or something like that. So their reaction was to kind of get very upset with the council and say, how can you bring this up? I think we need to stop this. And they left. And that was the end of it.
In my reading, I've come across articulations of childhood as a modern concept, because pre-industrial revolution, I'm not sure if children were sort of separate from adults. The concept of play and of this stage of life as a time for discovery and learning, maybe it's a relatively new concept. And something that seems to have come up with our separation of spaces for children, creating schools, is just that the experience of childhood has changed from the past. And I think that this might impact the way we grow into adults. So, can you maybe share your experience of and your views from your research on just childhood?
Currently, our laws in India define any person below 18 years of age as a child. Different laws have different definitions. Like in the labor, younger children can also be employed, can do some work. Of course, it defines the nature of the work. But the POCSO Act, which is more relevant to us, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, says anyone below 18 is a child and also cannot give consent for any sexual activity. Now, that becomes problematic because to call a person who can biologically have a child is problematic, and it is causing issues, the reporting and the way the law is being used by certain people. So it's very important to understand this idea of childhood. Different psychologists worked on this from the previous centuries and earlier as well. And it was not so quite segregated, though, of course, we are quite cognizant that a child that is born and a child at 2 years of age, at 12, have different capacities and capabilities. And we do have this biological idea of when an organism becomes capable of reproduction. So sometimes we use that as the dividing between this. And usually, in any organism, be it a bacteria or a dog or a cat or a human, generally, when that individual organism becomes capable of survival, in whichever way that species survives, as a group or more individually, once they become capable of that, then the reproductive capacity also kicks off. So if you see in humans, this is happening around 11, 12, 13, 14 years of age. And it's also quite easy to understand that, if you just do a thought experiment and you took 52-year-olds and left them in a jungle and came away, went back after a year, you may not find anyone alive. But if they were 6 years old, you would say maybe one or two Mowgli types might survive. But if they were 12 years old, quite a few may have survived, and some may have reproduced as well. Right? So there is increasing capacity, increasing cognitive capacity, intelligence, physical capacity, and with that comes the reproductive capacity.
And this is also culturally determined, right? Because different states have varying ages of consent. In some countries, the age of consent is as low as 14, and in some, it's when people are much older.
Generally around 16. See, in India also, if you look at the age of marriage, it has changed over decades. It was at one point of time 9 years. Then it became...
By law.
Yeah, 12, 13. And then the age of consent was actually 16 for a very long time. It's only in the recent past that it has become 18. And then the age of marriage different for girls and for boys. Whereas in many countries across the world, it is 18 for any sex. Yeah, so these are gray areas.
Just thinking about childhood as a time of innocence, of discovery, of growth, and maybe when we look at capability for survival, like you just spoke about, it also kind of delineates the child's sexual experience from the adult's. So could you share maybe why there is still the need to protect children, even though they are also sexual beings? Why prevent children from engaging in sex acts?
One is that many people are using children for their sexual needs. to satisfy their sexual needs. Very much like a sex toy, except that this is live. So they are using it, and it's not for the benefit of the child. It's causing immense damage to the child because of the way everybody else responds to it, and also this fact that you're being just used and exploited, right? Vulnerability is there in every one of us. Of course, all living things can die, so we are all vulnerable. But the idea is not to hide your vulnerability, not to deny your vulnerability, but not to exploit somebody's vulnerability. That's the thing. So here we do need laws, but it will be very nice if we could learn to respect everybody and not tell our children respect elders. No, it's such a beautiful concept, respect. Respect everybody, people of your age, younger than you, children, human beings, non-living things. I also want to point out the word innocence. It's different from ignorance. And innocence we apply for absence of guilt. So somehow in our minds, knowledge of how sex happens, knowledge of how a baby is born is corrupting. You are guilty if you have that knowledge. Yeah, so if a 6-year-old tells the pregnant aunt, oh, so your baby will come out of the vagina. So instead of saying, oh, wow, like they post, no, my child can play the piano at this age, my child can do mental maths. But this knowledge is considered corrupting somehow. So then we use words like innocence. All children are innocent because we consider them incapable of a crime, at least until 7 years of age. It has nothing to do with knowledge, and knowledge can never be corrupting. Knowledge is pure knowledge. How you use it, for what purpose, that would then make it appropriate, inappropriate, and all of that.
I want to come back to what you said about knowledge, ignorance, and innocence, because I think it really captures how an adult engaging in a sex act is often not ignorant of their behavior. They are aware of what they are seeking, but a child is possibly completely unaware in the sense that sexuality has not yet entered their schema. So they haven't had a chance to explore this domain of knowledge, and they haven't developed the right to consent.
And our experiences happen through our bodies and in our brains, and they're immensely affected by the milieu, the environment that the brain has and the body has. And in children, prepubertal children, the hormones have not yet come in. So the hormones, once they come in, they bring an extra sensation, which you just can't experience if you don't have it. So whatever exploration children do, and it's very fascinating. We do see children in the uterus, in the womb during ultrasound. The male child having an erection, maybe even touching, sometimes they hold the penis. After birth, children routinely explore their bodies, and this becomes much more once they are, say, 1.5 years of age onwards. This is called the genital phase. The first phase is the oral phase. Everything goes into the mouth, and then everything practically is going into the genitals. We do have little girls being brought to say, there was a bead she was playing with, there was a small crayon she was playing with, it's missing, or it's gone into the vagina, right? So they do explore their bodies, and they can experience pleasure, obviously, the nerves are there, and they can even experience an orgasm. It's just like a child's ability to taste sweetness, or even, say, vision. Children are born with very poor vision. Then the vision improves. It's all black and white in the beginning. Then the color vision develops. So it's like that for sexual development also. They can perceive pleasure, and then as they begin to walk and become more independent, and they start meeting other children, they should be left alone, I feel, sometimes without clothes. They would explore each other's bodies, and that we call as socio-sexual play. It's common between 3 to 7 years of age. It is a spontaneous game that children play. It's not something that they plan. Come tomorrow at 5 o'clock, we'll play this game. Yeah. No. They'll be playing something, and then they would all go somewhere, either into the corner of the room, behind a door, or into the bathroom. to play this game of I'll show you my genitals, you show me yours. Right? It's showing and touching with their hands, asking each other questions like what is it called, and what is this, why is it different, that kind of things. But it is not associated with anger, sadness, force, pressure. And if a child is doing that, maybe there is some sexual abuse going on, and that's why the child is playing this out here. Now, why I was emphasizing this privacy is because it is inherent in us. We tend to do sexual acts in private. Various evolutionary scientists have tried to figure out why. Probably the reason is that privacy affords protection in the wild, from wild animals and attack, and also from fellow competitors. Yeah, other males, other females, right? So we tend to do this in private. Children automatically develop a sense of modesty by the time they are 6 or 7 years of age. And that's also a natural development, probably leading to this sexual privacy. Right? So the body begins to prepare for it. They will have proto-romantic feelings. So a 6-year-old may come back from school and say, I want to marry that girl.
Yeah, that's so common.
Yeah?
Yeah, I've worked with children of that age group actually, with preschool children. And this is so common in that age group. Children play acting, parenting, and marriage. And I think I can also remember it from my own childhood.
So I'm Saurabh. I'm 33 years old. I'm a male. My story comes from when I had just joined boarding school and I was around 9 years old at the time. And after making a set of friends in school, one activity we kind of started getting into was going for swims in the nearby ponds and tanks. At which point we'd obviously take off all our clothes, and a few times we got caught by our seniors and they ended up making a bit of fun of us, and it was like this whole thing of them catching us in our underwear. And it became a sort of thing for us. I think like we felt like we were crossing a boundary. We decided to lean into it. We started maybe showing off more parts of ourselves to each other, taking off our clothes, showing each other our genitals, coming up with names for each other's genitals. This was just a group of 3 or 4 boys. And we used to stay in the hostels, used to be mixed gender until boys were in 5th grade and until girls were in 7th grade. So there was a group of 5 of us in this one house, and we were just getting, I guess, comfortable with each other. And I think we kind of wanted to involve everybody else in this fun and also in what we thought was being rebellious. And we were looking at it, I think, in a sort of hippie-ish, free love, free the nipple sort of way. And initially it began with just like taking off our shirts and running around in the house. And for the most part, it was just seen as a matter of fun. No one really seemed to care. The girls would mostly, they got that we were doing it to annoy them. I don't think they seemed to care otherwise, except for the fact that we were doing it to get a rise out of them. So maybe it succeeded in that regard. Until at one point, one of us decided to flash our genitals as well to one of them. And that became a bigger issue. And I remember that was the point where it stopped being a thing that we would do. No one really, it wasn't something we spoke about. And then it wasn't even a thing where we were sternly told not to do it anymore. Just one of us was spoken to and we kind of realized, okay, maybe this is the limit and we don't need to go much further. There's not much to be gained out of it. The fun kind of ended. I think that was the bigger thing.
In our culture, I think this is an experience that maybe many children have. As young children, having been sent to take a bath with other children, with friends, with cousins, and boys and girls together. And it's something that maybe happens in different ways across cultures, but it's a very clear memory that I have. And it was always a joyful experience to be sent to play in the water with none of your clothes on.
And they will have questions because they're intelligent and they ask questions about everything. What makes the fan go round? Why did it stop like that? And they are forming a concept about why things are the way they are. So this 3-year-old her father used to give her a bath. I think he was a doctor. And both would take a bath together. One day when the child was 3 years old, she said, "Daddy, my teddy bear also has a tail, but it is at the back." Instead of using that as an opportunity to provide knowledge and information, the father came out and said to the wife, "I won't give her a bath anymore, you give her a bath." Recently, I was taking a session for our obstetricians, and I asked them, "What would you have done?" And one of the younger obstetricians said, "Oh, I would have said, oh, it's funny you say that. It's not a tail. It's the dada's penis, and we use it to pass urine." Yeah. And that's why mama's and dada's bodies are different. Yeah. Because in mama's body, there is a place for the baby to come out. Right? Where is that? Near her susu place. Yeah. So that's why her susu place is different. And you will grow big into a female, right? So your susu place is different from my susu place.
That's great to take that opportunity, because I think what happens very often is that instead of knowledge, there's silence. And I know from my own personal experience when I was a child, I didn't know that there were 3 orifices in the female lower body. I just thought there was the urethra and the anus. And I thought for all practical purposes, the baby comes out of the one in front. And so puberty was quite a horrific experience, because suddenly you discover, wait, there's another opening. What is this for? And it feels different. And is it dirty? Why has no one spoken to me about it before? And I don't think I'm alone in that experience.
So that is where sexuality education actually begins. From the time you are cleaning your child, maybe the child is just a few months old. But even a child who is under 1 year of age, I think, can understand 500 words, if I'm right. But a horrendous number of words they understand. So we can begin by saying, okay, I'm going to change your nappy. Not ask their permission, may I change your nappy, right? You can just inform them, your nappy seems to be full, I'm going to change it. And I'm wiping your genitals or vulva or susu place or urethra or vagina or penis or scrotum or anus. And it's better if you use the language you speak generally with the child. Many people start using English for this, even though they may be speaking some other Indian language. So it creates a distance. That connection is gone. Just for this part, suddenly everything is English. And then for the other parts, it's back to nim kanna nim muga nim this and all that, right?
Yeah.
So use that thing, look up the words. We have lost quite a few of them because of the long silence we had from the time agriculture began and gender bias set in and all of that. So look up the words. With my own little granddaughter, I learned the words and I say maldwar for the anus, maldwar, yeah, when wiping her anus, jananang for genitals. So you can begin like that because it prevents this silence. Otherwise, parents teach the child all the parts of their bodies from head to the belly button. Around the belly button is all stomach. And then they use the same word, the baby grows in the stomach. And the coffee and the dosa and the roti is all going in there. And then comes straight away the toes, maybe the leg, but never the thigh. Thigh is not mentioned. Too sexual a word. Yeah, the closer we get to the genitals, the more sexual the parts of the body become. But you can just say after your belly button, this is your susu place. You don't, peshab ki jagah, if you don't want to use technical words, you can use unambiguous words. Mm-hmm. But don't use words like, this is your flower, this is your cookie, this is your parrot. These are all words parents have told me. For the male child, this is your parrot. Now, can you imagine this child in the school goes to the toilet, somebody molests him, he comes back, tells the teacher, somebody was touching my parrot. What's the teacher to say? Ye kya tota maina ki kahani hai? Jao, baitho. A child actually reported sexual abuse when the child told the mother, uncle is messing with my cookie. The mother has said, this is your cookie. Not here, it's in the US. And The mother has forgotten. She said, but you should share your cookies, no? So the child went back to play with the uncle.
That's confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. So say susu potty, some word which is clear, right? And also when we teach our children words in English and they're going to a school where the support staff may not be well versed with these terms and the child is reporting something to the support staff, they won't get it. What is this vulva? I never heard of it.
I'm interested that you brought up support staff because I want to talk a little bit about how in Bangalore, at least, in the recent years, there were many cases of sexual abuse on campus or in the school buses. And I won't name the school, but as a measure to prevent this sort of sexual abuse and physical abuse of children, this one school completely eliminated male support staff. So all of the cleaners and the other support staff were women. And I found that a little bit concerning because one, it assumes that women are not capable of abuse. And two, it placed men outside of this role of giving care, particularly intimate care, because in this school, the teachers would not take the toddlers to the toilet. That job was given to the support staff. And there are so many levels to this. There's also an assumption somewhere that men of lower classes are more likely to commit crimes. There were also many male teachers who would be brought into the school to teach things like music, maybe art. But when it comes to these roles that involve touch, that involve more direct care, it was always given to women and there was no space for men in that role. And I found this quite concerning.
Yes, it's good not to name the school because this could happen in any school. To say that it happens in English medium schools, schools in Bangalore Central, not in rural Bangalore, it happens in India, not in Bharat. No, it happens everywhere, and especially in schools. Why? Because children are there. And what is a child sexual abuser looking at? Yeah, one thing is they begin with the children in their families, nothing happens. They continue, and then it's like, not all of them, but quite a few of them, where can I get more children on a regular basis? Schools. That's why you find so many reports coming from schools. Maximum reports should be coming from homes, but people don't do that. In a school, they're ready to report. The male staff. Yes, if you look at perpetrators, overwhelmingly it's males. It doesn't mean that females don't abuse. There are female sexual abusers as well as of any other sex. But overwhelmingly it is male. Maybe, just maybe, because male sexuality and its traversity and its abuse has been tolerated for such a long time. For example, if a grandfather, a father is abusing a child in their home, people get to know, but they still keep quiet about it. But if it was a mother abusing her son and the family found out, what do you think would happen to this mom? Who should be protected in the name of the family, or she would be driven out, shamed and driven out.
Yeah, that's a very layered situation.
Likely driven out. No. But the male members are protected. So you will find more males abusing and getting away with it. Also, a lot of our stories, ancient stories also, talk about blatant abuse, assault, pulling of clothes, kidnapping, all of that, marrying against wishes, carrying off women by male heroes. And even if another male does come to help this female, they don't necessarily hold the perpetrator accountable and responsible. They don't really stop the perpetrator. They somehow try to protect the woman without calling out the perpetrator. So the males tend to think that this is the way to treat women. It's okay. Okay. So for various reasons, we do find that there are more male perpetrators. That does not mean that we should bring up our children in female-only schools and for all the reasons that you mentioned. Also, we need to prepare our children to live in this world and we live all sexes together. Also, whatever said and done, whatever the huge number of sexual abuse reported in the child sexual abuse study by the government of India in 2007, where they found that 53% of our children reported sexual abuse, 21% reported severe sexual abuse, slightly more percentage of boys than girls in both these figures. All kinds of sexual abuse plus the severe sexual abuse. In both these figures, there were more boys.
Which might be counter to what we think.
Yes. So in spite of that, if we say 53% of our children reported sexual abuse, and you may say, okay, the study was flawed, maybe there was this error, that error, you make it half. Make it 1/4 also. Still a huge number. So even though we have a huge number of children who are targeted for sexual abuse, not 53% of our adult population is made up of abusers. It's not even 24%. It's not even 10%. It's very difficult to figure out what percent. But it's a very small number. What happens is that this one person will abuse several children. So they will all report sexual abuse, but the perpetrator is one. So what we need to support our children in doing, and schools can do this very well, is give them the education about personal space, their bodies, and how to interact with each other, how to touch each other in a safe manner. Of course, make space for the socio-sexual play that small children do, and help children to grow up to be safe adults who interact with others in a safe manner. They can also identify unsafe touch, unsafe behavior, and they know whom to report it to, and they know that it is not the person who is being targeted who is to be blamed for it or has any stigma or should feel shame. No, it is a person who is doing it. So hold them responsible, hold them accountable. Yeah. If we do that, then it will become like any other crime, like hitting somebody, somebody pinching me, somebody calling me names. How children will come and report to you. The same way they'll come and report sexual unsafe behavior.
I think what's coming up is that we could do with shifting the onus onto the perpetrators in order to prevent sexual abuse, right? So of course we want to educate children to learn safe behaviors, to learn safe boundaries, but we also need to educate adults, and we need to keep that education continuous across life stages so that maybe we can prevent people from becoming sexual abusers. But on that note, I also want to ask you to talk a little bit about pedophilia and to just shed some light on what gives rise to pedophilia, and is that the same as someone who commits a sexual offense on a child?
So holding people responsible and accountable is the only way to help them, support them in changing their behavior so that they're more respectful of people and all of that. In sexual abuse especially, we find this missing. This is again historically because of agriculture and after that ownership of land, wanting the land to go to my children. There was a lot of restrictions placed on the female sexuality, the wife, and the girls were supposed to have their entire respect was supposed to lie in their vaginas, and they were supposed to protect it. And the male members who were related to them, like the father, the brother, the son, and the husband, not related, but yeah, that way related, were supposed to protect the honor of the women in their family, avenge it. And it has taken strange forms. In some countries, one of my friends was telling me she was working in that country, and she said it was very common that they would come and say, that person abused my daughter, so as revenge, I abused his daughter. Because women had become the property. Right? You damage my property, I'll damage your property. And the males were not held accountable, responsible for it. And we had the making of the second kind of women, Those who were trafficked, exploited, they were available for sex with whomever, wherever, however. And they had no honor, they had no nothing. Women were not supposed to enjoy their sexuality. They were supposed to be pious and
sort of give it
when the husband, whenever he wanted. And now in this scenario, the virginity of the daughter in their family has to be maintained. Now, I am a father in those days, and I find that my brother is sexually abusing my 5-year-old. I have the option of dragging him, taking him to the center of the village and saying this is what he's doing. But then nobody will marry my daughter, right? Because they all want virgins. And also, if I did do that, it doesn't matter, she doesn't get married, doesn't matter. But the man I'm accusing of will then say that, you know what, I've abused all the girls in that family. Now I'm left with all my daughters, right? And one day I'll die. I don't know who will take care of them because they're not allowed to go out, trade, economy, nothing. They're supposed to be in the house, learn the household chores only, beautify their bodies and, be an object for the man. So he will rather keep quiet about it, not call the brother out, not anger him.
It's a matter of his own respect, his own continuity in that community.
Yeah. So he'll pretend it never happened. But the human mind wants to put the blame somewhere, no? So they will find fault. They started finding fault with the girl. Maybe you only initiated it. Maybe you enjoyed it. Why didn't you shout? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you this? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why are you telling me after 30 years? So it's happening even today. We had a person working with us who told us about their friend who was young and she was sexually very, very few boundaries. And every time this person would talk to her, this girl would say, but I'm like that only. I'm like that. My body is like that. You know what they figured later on? This friend found out that this girl had been abused by the grandfather at the age of 6 months. Of course, the family found out, but the family can't blame the grandfather. So they found a way to blame the child. This child, her body is somehow very sexual. It is emanating such sexual signals that this poor 60-plus man couldn't help himself. There's something wrong with the body. So this child grew up hearing from her parents that your body is like that only.
Wow. So the child kind of internalizes this message that they are inviting trouble.
Yes, and see how media also reports. There was a big report once of PhD student from Harvard doing sex work. So I was curious. It was a large article, inner pages, big one. So I read one column, second column, third column, chota sa. And she said that she had been sexually abused by her father in her childhood. Instead of the heading being child sexual abuse can have long-term effects or, but those are not catchwords. PhD student doing sex work. I want to read it. And also this accountability and responsibility, it's there in our language. The way we are reporting, we are taking away the responsibility and accountability. It's the way you phrase it. So if you say, Ramesh hit Sunita, then you'll say, oh, why did Ramesh hit Sunita? If you say Sunita was hit by Ramesh, you'll say, what did Sunita do that Ramesh had to hit her? And sometimes Ramesh is not there at all.
Yeah.
Sunita was hit.
Yeah. That is most of the media coverage of sexual abuse. Woman raped, girl gang raped. It's talking about a person who has had something done to them rather than someone who did something to another person.
Exactly. And the age. Why is the age and the gender of that person important, of that child?
I want to spend a little more time talking about this relationship between the parent and the child via touch, particularly between the father and the child. I've read that after a certain age, a lot of fathers stop touching, especially the male child, stop hugging the child, picking up the child, having the child on the lap, just ways that they've always shown them affection. And I feel like this is reflected in the way that boys grow up. But there's often a slap on the back, maybe a handshake, a fist bump, a shoulder bump. something that we think of as more masculine ways of touching. But we've seen, and you've also mentioned, that this skin-to-skin contact, even between the father and an infant, can produce oxytocin, can create bonding between them. And I'm maybe of the belief that if we don't pick up and touch an infant, we're seriously impairing its growth. I don't know if it's true that a child can die if it's not touched enough at infancy, but I'd just like you to reflect a little bit on how touch between men and boys changes over time, and maybe how that plays a role in the way that men grow into sexual beings, into adults.
Yeah, so talking about the role of touch between boys and men, extremely important. It remains important throughout life. In fact, one of the biggest problems is that we don't touch elderly people, right? So they also suffer from that loneliness and touch. The skin is the largest sensory organ we have. Touch will produce a sense of belonging, trust, and oxytocin continues to be released in both the people.
Throughout life?
Yes. If you are touched and if you touch somebody.
And again, to clarify, this is not limited to parent-child or even sexual partners.
No,
We're
anyone.
talking about touch.
Yes.
Across the spectrum.
There's a nice book called The Evolved Nest. It talks about parenting in different animals, non-human animals, and then draws parallels with our way of parenting. This is in Africa. They noticed, suddenly they found that a lot of rhinos were dead. They had been killed. So they thought, oh, must be some poachers are at it. But the horns were intact. Nothing had been taken from these rhinos. And some had been sexually assaulted. And they were like, what's happening here? They looked, and what they found were that juvenile elephants, male elephants, were doing this. And they were like, this has never happened before. No one has ever seen something like this happen before. What changed? What happened? And what had happened is, over a few years, the population of elephants had reduced drastically in that country because of poaching. So they had imported elephants. Now, when you're importing an elephant, it's coming by ship or whatever, you're conscious of the weight. So they imported young elephants, young males, right? Not adolescent males, not grown-up adult males. They brought in very young children male elephants. And a whole lot of them were brought in, and a whole lot of them grew up in the jungle without any elderly males' supervision. They don't live in a group like the females live, but they are there. They're there, and they are guiding, and they are setting a role model.
And they are
peer
also
model.
even socialized by the female elephants.
Yeah.
Right?
But at adolescence, the male will leave that herd.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of that was missing for these.
The whole process of being co-parented and socialized was just
Yes,
not there.
gone. So this was the effect. And researchers have long overlooked this. Like they would go into this house and say, I want to study how parenting is happening for this child. Okay. So they will sit, they will observe the mother with the child and all of that. And, they're making notes. The moment the father comes into the picture, the child goes to the father, they stop taking notes. So the literature on fatherhood was missing.
Come on, get in Bobo. We'll check a flight first.
What's Bobo? It's the name of our car. There's no room for me. Oh no, Bobo's full. You'll have to stay here. Oh, what? This is the worst day of all my life.
Bluey, you'll have to sit in the front seat.
What? The front seat? Really? Is that allowed?
Queensland road rules say that if all the seats are taken, a child older than
There's a
4
children's
in the front
program
seat.
called Bluey. It's an animated series that my niece watches, and I think a lot of very young children watch. And it's about a dog named Bluey and her sister and their parents. And there's an episode in which Bluey and her younger sister Bingo are playing with the dad, and the dad is doing things like picking them up and tossing them onto something big and soft like a beanbag. And so there's a lot of rough and tumble. And Bluey is laughing, she's enjoying the game. But Bingo, the younger sister, looks a bit disturbed, but she doesn't say anything. And then later in the same episode, she starts crying. And so both the parents ask her what's wrong. And she tells the mother, I think dad was playing too rough with me. And so the mother tells her, why don't you tell him that? And so, because they're all dogs, it's quite cute. And the way that the dog tells the dad that he's playing too rough is he tests it out. So he does whatever the action is, and it's quite mild, and Bingo says that's okay. And then he does it again a little harder, and she says that's okay. And maybe the next time he throws her with more force onto this beanbag cushion bouncy thing. And then she says, rough.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that episode because it didn't take the father away from playing with the children, but it also taught the child how to express a boundary.
You know, we often have this debate. I kiss my child on the lips. What's wrong? You know, kissing is something that we do as a sexual act. It helps us find a mate and prevent inbreeding because of the antigens which are present in the saliva. So it's good not to kiss children on the mouth. You can kiss them elsewhere on the face, and there's so much head and shoulders and all that is available. Because also, if you say it's okay for mommy to kiss you, is it okay for daddy to kiss you? Is it okay for grandmother to kiss you and for grandfather to kiss you and for uncle to kiss you and for, you know, how? Would you be fine with that also? And when it comes to abuse being perpetrated by women, we have had some situations where this one child, he was maybe 3-4-year-old, went to the mother and said, let's play the game that Party plays with me. Grandmother plays with me. So, okay, yeah, let's play. What is the game? You take your Mangal Sutra and put it inside your blouse and I will fish it out. We need to be very clear that perpetrators could be anyone. And the other thing that happens is don't trust men. All men are like that. Crazy, absolutely crazy. No. Think of the number of men and women and people you have crossed in your life who have come within an arm's distance of you. How many? Lakhs. How many did actually reach out and touch you in an inappropriate way?
We've kind of established that touch is an essential part of growth throughout life. So it's not like you can touch a child because it needs care, and then you just stop touching the child because now it's an adolescent. And then suddenly when the child has become an adult, they have to go figure out how to get the nourishment and the intimacy that they need through touch. And a term that comes up for me is tactile literacy. So it's not just that we need to expect children to know what's good and bad, but we all need to sort of grow into knowing how to touch in a way that communicates safely. I was in a hospital visiting someone, and I saw on another bed a patient who looked like she was suffering quite a lot. And the attendant, assuming someone from her family, was holding on to her in a sort of desperate way. There must have been a lot of anxiety about whether this person would survive. And the only thing I could think was, is that touch communicating to this patient? Is it giving that patient a sense of comfort? Is it assuring them that this person is there for them? What does it feel like? And unless we have throughout our lives a practice of touching with care, with intention, with information, we might not know how to touch. So maybe you could just dwell a little bit on, rather than good touch and bad touch, other articulations of touch itself.
So first thing first, how do we learn to touch? And then the vocabulary. Just like you are not taught how to swallow, how to latch on, how to breathe, how to see, we know how to touch. And children have this grasping reflex. And not only that, the moment the child is born and you put the child on the mother's tummy, the smell of the breast and the milk would make that child kind of slither. Newborn baby, still the placenta, the thing is attached, slither and would come and latch on to the breast. So touching is inherent. We know how to touch. And as we grow older, and once all these sexual hormones come in, then we can also distinguish a touch which is like, just a pat on my shoulder versus that pat remains on my shoulder and rubs my shoulder slowly. Nobody has to teach me. I just feel this is strange. But if the person I'm interested in, that person I would like to go and hug, touch, I would just know. Nobody teaches people how to kiss. We just know.
But we do receive conflicting messages about this, right? In our youth, in our childhood. Just talking about the silence around abuse. A child might feel like this might be wrong, but it's an adult and it's an adult from my family, so maybe I should continue to allow them to do this. And maybe a little later in life, in adolescence, someone wants to show affection to someone else, but they're told by the adults around them, no, you shouldn't do this. Girls and boys should have a distance between them. And this is kind of sending a mixed message. Allow the abuse, but don't express the healthy desires.
So what I was talking about is that individuals know how to touch and how to perceive touch and the different kinds of touch. We don't teach that to them, they know it. What you're talking about is part of personal safety and sexuality education, where we are making a distinction between safe touch and unsafe touch, safe behaviors and unsafe behaviors. You're right, we need not label them good touch, bad touch, because good and bad are moral judgments. Also, sometimes a so-called bad touch can feel good to the child.
In the moment.
Yeah. So just make it safe and unsafe, and that can be there throughout life. We teach that, safe touch, unsafe touch. For children, the genitals, the chest, the buttocks, those are the ones we kind of draw out in the mouth. The mouth is also private. Now, when we call a part private part, it doesn't mean that the rest of the parts are public parts. Because I see that happen sometimes.
Right.
Oh, which are the public parts of the body and which are the private parts of the body? No, these are private parts. We can touch them ourselves, but not in front of others. So that leaves space for masturbation. Same thing happens with adolescents. When they are like 11, 12 and all, they would explore themselves. All sexes, all genders together. It does not indicate their sexual orientation, but sexual exploration is very common among adolescents also. So we can just call it safe and unsafe, and also say that you behave in a safe manner, and these are certain parts of the body we don't touch of another person. And we also say without their consent. And then depending on the laws in force, we talk about the law, because we don't want a child to get into trouble because they didn't know. A 17-year-old boy did tell me that if I knew I would land up in this observation home because I ran away with my 17-and-a-half-year-old girlfriend and her mother filed a complaint, if I had known the law, I wouldn't have run away with her. So we do tell them about the law.
And this is bringing up another question that I wanted to come back to, again related to the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act and the need to shift focus onto the perpetrators rather than the children. What you spoke about was the experience of a 17-year-old boy who's reflected and been able to appreciate that he could have prevented what he did. But very often our response to sexual offences, and this has happened in many movements across our country in recent years, calls to hang the rapist or for chemical castration. And there's a debate, right, about punitive versus retributive justice. What is really going to effect a change at a larger level? Education is one part, a way to work within communities. But if we look at, again, the socio-legal aspects of this, and if we think about punishing a perpetrator as a way to hold them accountable, is that going to prevent the incidence of the sexual offense in the future?
So the 17-year-old had only said I wouldn't have run away. Not that he wouldn't have explored and, kissed and hugged his girlfriend. The law really can't do much in these cases. A lot of courts are acquitting it's usually the male that gets put in the dock. They're acquitting them. saying the POCSO Act was not meant to criminalize adolescent sexuality. In fact, here the perpetrator, I would say, are the parents and the schools and the communities,
Our
which are
society
not,
as a whole.
yeah,
So
which
all
are
of
not,
us.
not providing them with enough information, about how to manage their sexuality. You may feel extremely attracted towards a person, but is having sex the only way to express it? Are there safer ways? Are there other ways? Do you have to? And also, do you have to explore your sexuality right now? Yeah?
That's an important one.
Yeah. So, 5th grade children are asking what to do if my boyfriend is asking me, will you marry me or will you have sex with me? 5th grader. Okay.
Marry or have sex.
And others were like, why do we feel these feelings? What is happening? So I gave them the analogy of this beautiful car. Till now, you have had this two-wheeler, dowdy little two-wheeler, and then suddenly you find that there's this beautiful car in your garage, all shiny. Yeah, it's self-start, beautiful, and you open the car and sit down, and it starts. That's the way puberty is. It's like a car, right? With everything, music. Oh wow, what music!
And very
Right?
fast pickup.
Very fast pickup. Buzuk jayega. Okay? And you are like totally taken aback. Oh wow, what happened? This is like Cinderella, right? So now you are like, okay, this is great. And then you look out of the window and there's another car right next to you. Equally shiny, equally beautiful, equally like revving to go. And then both of you decide to take off on the Bangalore-Chennai highway. How far do you think they will go before something happens?
Because they haven't learned to drive yet.
Yeah, I said, get to know the car first. Explore it. See what all there is. And my biggest problem I have with parents is that you have no right to mess with a child's sexuality forever by calling the sexual parts dirty, shameful, bad. If a child is touching their genitals, which they will, you hit them, you say, "Chhi, too dirty, go wash your hands."
Yeah.
This part is not dirty. I'm talking about the genitals.
Yeah.
It's not the anus.
Yeah.
Genitals, what is there? There's hair. I'll touch my hair, you won't say anything. The skin, I touch my skin, you don't say anything. What else? There's discharge. I take out the discharge from my eye right in front of you now. You don't say, "Chhi, too dirty, go wash your hands."
Right.
What else? Urine. Urine is sterile. People drink it. What is dirty about it? There is nothing dirty about it. Don't call it dirty, because later in life, if one of the partners wants oral sex, the other one goes, "Chhi, too dirty."
Yeah.
Touching, masturbation.
Yeah.
It's a sin. It's dirty. It's bad. Shameful. Concentrate on your studies. Don't masturbate. What is this? Are?
Yeah, there are a lot of myths about the body.
And you want to attach sin to something, okay, that's your belief system. We have no problem with any belief system that you may have. The only thing we suggest, not insist, is that your behavior and your belief should be in sync. Otherwise, you will have internal turmoil and stress. I got a call, it was an email from a boy saying, "Ma'am, I will fail in my 10th grade exams. My board exams are coming. I'm sure I will fail." "Why do you think you will fail?" "Because I masturbate and God will punish me. So it's a sin and God will punish me." I said, "Listen, I'm also an examiner. Unless you write on the margin of the paper, answer sheet, 'By the way, I masturbate,' there is no way the examiner will know. Right? You will get the marks that according to what you write, so go ahead." His belief is that it's a sin. His behavior is that he masturbates. Obviously, there'll be conflict. You can either change your belief or your behavior, and both are possible.
I think when we think about children reporting sexual abuse or what they've perceived as sexual abuse, how would they go about doing that in your view, in your practice?
We encourage children, adults, whoever, to practice this no-go tell. Say no if you can to that person, because really we don't teach our children to say no. We always don't feel empowered to say no, even as adults. because there's so many factors. He's my boss, she's my boss, what's going to happen? He's my grandfather. So I'm supposed to respect him and all that. So say no if you can. Even with your body, you may or may not say no, judging by the safety aspects. Like, I often say, somebody comes with acid, somebody comes with a knife, I'll say, but do whatever you want to do. I may even cooperate to avoid injury to my body. And then because I consider my life precious, I have a certain purpose in this life, there's something I want to create, which is of use to me and to the society. This person seems to be on some other path. Why should I put my life in danger to avoid whatever crime that they are trying to perpetrate? So say no if you can, and then go away from that unsafe person as and when you can. It is not at the cost of your life. No need to jump off a balcony to save your honor. Your honor is intact. You have not done anything. Because it's part of your behavior. No one can take it away from you. It's not a thing that will be taken away by the sexual assault. The person who is assaulting is losing their honor, their respect. So go away as and when you can from that unsafe person to a place of safety or to people who are safe. And then as and when you feel ready, do tell. Because while abuse, child sexual abuse especially, happens in seclusion, in isolation, in silence, the healing, the support, the response needs support of many people.
Needs people.
Many people.
So say no, go away, and then tell people.
And if the first person you tell, foo-foos is away, says something like, oh, but it happened to me also, and that's how it is. Yeah, my mama also abused me. Or the abuse has stopped now. No. So let it be. And these are all responses that actual victims have reported to us. Right? That's what the responses they got. Go on telling until somebody can take steps, of course, to support you, to help you with your healing, and also hold that other person accountable, responsible. Because that's what the child who has been abused, and here we use the term child victim because you can't expect a child to be a survivor. The child victim is looking at two things. One thing is to be believed and the abuse to stop. But they're also looking at, this was not fair. How come that person did that? I'm going to ask. I'm going to hold that person responsible. They want to see that because fairness is embedded in us. We want to be treated fairly. And not only us, even animals. They had these two chimpanzees. They were doing the same job, but one is given a green grape, the other is given a green bead as reward. And this is done 2, 3, 4 times, same thing. The one who is getting the bead is getting angrier and angrier and angrier. The 4th time he's given a bead, he throws it down. Because the other guy is eating the grape, right? So treat me fairly. I did the same job. Where is my grape?
Pay for equal work.
Yeah. So the child's sense of fairness will not be satisfied if you just stay silent and don't hold the other person accountable and responsible.
This series was made possible with the generosity and knowledge of Dr. Sangeeta Saxena and the contributions of Abha Khetarpal, Dipankar Pant, Diya Naidu, Meghna Roy, Mitch Gupta, Nitya Devaya, and Saurabh Levin. We thank Vikram Bhatt and the team at the Bangalore International Centre for their support. Safe Spaces was produced by Gaurav Krishna and Ishan Gupta. I am Anisha Tawag. Thank you for listening.